My name is Ben Abbott. I'm a professor of environmental science and sustainability at BYU. I study ecosystems and how human society develops within ecosystems, how it affects the environment, how the environment affects human society.
I'm Dr. Bryan Hopkins. I'm a professor in the Plant Wildlife Sciences Department at BYU.
Hi, I'm Dr. Matt Bekker. I'm a professor of geography, and I'm a physical geographer, which means I'm interested in connections among all of Earth's systems.
It can be really difficult to figure out what's going on. You know, you hear an account, it's a dry year, or it's an extreme drought, and I was born in 1984, and I feel like almost every year since that time, we've been in drought conditions. That's actually almost true. We're in what's called a megadrought, a period of 10 years or more of below average precipitation conditions. This megadrought is the most intense in at least 500 years, and likely the most intense in over 2,000 years. It is really an extraordinary time period that we're living in right now. That's directly associated with human interference with climate. If you subtract the human signature, then we would be at approximately average precipitation and water availability conditions. So it's this paradox, right? It's not just more of the same that we're living through right now, even though for many of us, this is all that we've known. We're transitioning into a new state. So we need to respond to this in a very thoughtful way. We need to identify what's causing the issues with water and then propose solutions that can actually solve those problems.
Data shows that the average homeowner uses at least twice as much water in their irrigation than they need. So I think we start there. If everybody cuts back to 50%, that's good. And there's ways of doing that. You need to make sure your irrigation system is efficient. You don't have leaks, you don't have inaccurate overlap, those kinds of things. Installing smart controllers is good. And anyway, working with someone who's an expert on and reducing the amount of irrigation, not eliminating it, but reducing it.
Yeah, I think, first of all, we need to admit that. We need to admit that we live in a drought-prone area, we live in a desert, and we need to act like it. And that means, for starters, thinking differently, doing things differently than we've always done them. For example, using a different type of plant for landscaping. I'm not saying rocks. There are better plants out there than what we're using that don't need to be watered 3 or 4 times a week. They can get by with being watered 1 or 2 times a week. Lots of different options out there, and some of them are quite attractive options for still having a yard. But that's what a homeowner can do. But we need to think beyond the homeowner. I think everybody needs to get involved. We need business owners, we need legislators, we need the agricultural community. Everybody needs to get on board with this and, again, think about doing things maybe a little bit differently.
So there are a few topics that are as politicized as climate change. And it's interesting because there's a big disconnect between the scientific community, where researchers from all ideological and political backgrounds see the evidence and agree, including I have colleagues from the fossil fuel industry, from the National Science Foundation, from the IPCC, and everywhere in between. There's no disagreement about what climate change is and what it's causing. But the simple definition of climate change is a long-term shift in the weather patterns that we're seeing. So it has to be long-term. Climate is not defined by a single event or even a single year. We're talking about decades of change in the temperature, the precipitation, the timing of those things. And we often talk about anthropogenic or man-made climate change, because the climate has always changed in Earth's history. That isn't a negative or bad thing. However, what's different now is the addition of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere is causing climate change that is faster and more extreme than has been observed at any time in the Earth's history, going all the way back as long as we have these paleoclimate records. The Earth has never experienced as drastic, rapid, and widespread a change in climate as we are causing right now.
So in the western United States and many areas of the world, we depend on irrigation to grow crops. And if we didn't do that, we would have major problems in the world in terms of starvation and economic problems. So it's important for us to continue to grow food to support the population of the planet. But this drought makes it really difficult. We've got to use the water, but it's affecting yields. Many growers that I know are struggling. I talked to a grower yesterday that has been cut back to 50% of his water. I know another grower who has been cut back to almost zero. And so his livelihood is just really in trouble. And that affects the amount of food that we can grow.
The work that I've done in tree ring work has shown that there's tremendous variability in water resources. And this is just natural variation in the system. Now on top of that, we have climate change, anthropogenic climate change. It's kind of like poking a stick in that already very variable natural system. And so we can expect to have more variability in the future. And we've seen some droughts that have lasted for several decades. We're in what some people have called, and I agree with, a Megadrought right now. It's beyond anything that we've seen during the instrumental record. And so we're in very severe conditions right now, but in the past we've seen even worse droughts of greater magnitude, droughts of greater duration. So even with the natural variability in the system, we should be prepared for worse droughts than what we've seen. And that's why I say we need to think about doing things a little bit differently.
I think sometimes we get really despondent and focused on how big these problems are. And that can be really exhausting and discouraging. I even get phone calls from people who are experiencing anxiety and depression because of environmental degradation, whether that's climate change, air pollution, water pollution, or any loss of biodiversity. These huge issues can be really overwhelming. And I really encourage all of those people who call me to look up some of the successes that we've had. We have solved huge environmental problems in the past. We stopped the hole in the ozone layer. We've reduced air pollution dramatically throughout the United States and through much of the world, through smart legislation, through international agreements, through innovation in the private sector. All of those things together. We're now living in a time period where renewable energy that doesn't create pollution is cheaper than fossil fuel energy. It's this really exciting time. If you can familiarize yourself with the success stories and what led to those successes, then you can be empowered and enabled to know how to move forward. If all you do is look at headlines about how horrible this is and the next year is even worse, then you can end up in a really bad place, both with mental health and with your ability to contribute to solutions. So I'm not saying that all is well and that there's nothing to worry about, but I really believe and have seen, both in my own life and with the students and others that I work with, that when you can be realistic and positive and be familiar with our successes in the past, that can really increase your ability to create a positive future.